The washhouse windows had gone white with steam, and there was a wet blue dress hanging from the ceiling line when I heard my daughter trying not to cry. That is a sound a father knows, not crying itself, the holding back of it. The little breath pulled in too quickly, followed by silence, as though silence might keep the whole world from noticing. I stood outside the door with my hand on the latch, smelling lye soap and rainwater, and for several seconds I did nothing. I wish I could tell you that I opened the door because I understood what she needed. The truth is, I opened it because I was afraid of what the neighbors might hear. My name is Marlon. I have been Amish all my life, and I have farmed the same ground for more than 50 years. I am a father, a grandfather, and now an old man with enough years behind him to see the difference between protecting a family and protecting its appearance. I tell these stories because some truths take a lifetime before a man can say them plainly. Before I go on, I would like you to think about this. When someone you love came to you in pain, did you listen to what they said, or did you listen for the answer you already wanted to give? You may leave your thought below. I read more of them than you might suppose. My daughter Miriam was 34 that autumn. She had been married for nearly 14 years and had 3 children of her own. The youngest was 6. The oldest was already tall enough to look his mother directly in the eyes. Miriam lived 6 miles from us, close enough that we saw her at church and at family meals, but far enough that a person could hide a great deal between visits. That afternoon, she arrived in a closed buggy just before the rain. She had no children with her. That was the first thing I noticed. The second was that she did not come into the kitchen. My wife, Esther, was trimming beans at the table. Miriam spoke to her in a low voice, then carried a basket of washing toward the small wash house behind our home. There was nothing strange in bringing washing to her mother. Women helped one another that way. A stained quilt, heavy work trousers, a dress that needed a careful hand. Ordinary things gave a person reason to visit without explaining why. I was in the woodshed splitting kindling when the rain began. It came soft at first, ticking on the roof, then harder, flattening the dust in the yard. I gathered an armful of wood and crossed toward the house. As I passed the wash house, I heard that breath, the one pulled in too quickly. I set the wood beneath the eave. Through the small window, I could see only steam and the shadow of Miriam's shoulders. I remember the latch being cool beneath my thumb. I remember a drop of rain running from my beard onto the back of my hand. Those details remain. A man can forget whole years and still remember one drop of water. When I stepped inside, Miriam turned away. Her hands were in the wash basin, though the water had gone gray and still. She was wearing the dark green dress Esther had sewn for her the spring before. One sleeve was wet to the elbow. There was a red mark across the heel of her palm, where she had gripped the wringer too tightly. I asked whether something was wrong. It was a foolish question. We ask foolish questions when the honest one frightens us. She said she was tired. I told her every mother was tired by harvest time. She nodded. I told her the children were growing and would soon be more help. She nodded again. I told her marriage had seasons and that a difficult season did not mean a ruined field. That was how I spoke then. I made every sorrow into weather. Weather passes, so a person only needs patience. It is a useful belief until the storm is inside the house. Miriam took her hands from the basin and dried them on her apron. She looked at the floor. There were thin trails of soapy water running between the boards and disappearing into the cracks. Then she said very quietly, Ted, I came home because I knew you would tell me to go back. I did not understand her at first, or perhaps I understood and did not wish to. I asked what she meant. She lifted her face then. Her eyes were swollen, but there was no wildness in her. That is what troubled me most. She had already cried the wild part out somewhere else. What remained was tired and settled. She said, I knew Ma'am would ask whether I was safe. I knew you would ask whether anyone had seen me leave. Those words have stayed with me longer than many prayers. She was right. Before I asked what had happened, I had wondered who had seen her buggy on the road. Before I asked whether she was afraid, I had thought about her husband's family, the bishop, the questions at Sunday gathering. A father likes to believe his children know his love. Miriam knew my rules more clearly than she knew my love. That was not her failure, it was mine. Her husband, Jacob, had not struck her. I say that because for many years I used it as evidence that matters were not truly bad. He provided food, he worked hard, he attended church, he did not drink. From the outside, a man could collect those facts and build a respectable house from them. Miriam lived inside the house. She knew where the walls leaned. Jacob had become a man who needed every room to bend toward him. If supper was late, the children ate beneath his silence. If Miriam disagreed with him, he would not speak to her for days. He opened letters sent to her. He decided which relatives she could visit and how long she could remain. He corrected her in front of the children until even the youngest watched her face before answering a question. No single thing sounded large enough when spoken alone. Together they had made her small. She told me she had begun measuring each day by how little of herself she could show. I leaned against the work table. The room was warm, but my hands felt cold. I asked whether she had spoken with Jacob. She gave a small laugh that held no amusement. Every day, she said. That was the one line she gave me, and it carried 14 years with it. I should have taken her into the house. I should have called Esther. I should have told Miriam that she and the children could stay as long as they needed. Instead, I asked whether Jacob would be expecting supper. Even now, saying that aloud, I feel the shame of it. A man's worst moments are not always loud. Sometimes they are one ordinary sentence spoken when love required another. Miriam looked at me for a long time. Then she said she had left bread rising near the stove and that her eldest knew to bank the fire. She washed the soap from her hands. She folded the wet dress over her arm. I remember wanting to stop her as she reached the door, but wanting is a weak thing when it does not move the feet or open the mouth. She walked through the rain to her buggy. Esther came from the kitchen and stood beside me under the eave. She watched Miriam disappear down the lane. Then she turned and asked, "What did you send her back to?" Esther did not often speak sharply. She did not need to. The question was enough. That evening I sat at the table after supper while the lamp burned low. The rain continued against the windows. I thought about Miriam as a little girl, perhaps 7 years old, following me through the corn stubble in boots too large for her feet. She had carried 3 ears of corn in her apron as though they were treasure. At the fence she had slipped and I caught her beneath the arms before she fell. She laughed. I had been strong enough then to lift her over the rail with one hand. It is a bitter thing to discover that strength can leave a father long before his muscles weaken. I had spent my life believing protection meant providing a roof, keeping food in the cellar, teaching children to work, and guarding the family's name. Those things matter, But a roof is not protection if a daughter believes she must suffer beneath it to keep her father from embarrassment. The next morning I hitched the horse before sunrise. Esther packed bread, cheese, and a jar of applesauce into a basket. She did not ask where I was going. She only placed the basket beside me and said, "Bring her home if she wishes to come." The road to Miriam's place was muddy. Mist lay low over the fields. At one bend I passed two men hauling milk cans, and both raised a hand. I remember thinking that by evening they might know where I had gone. For once, that thought did not turn me around. Jacob was in the barn when I arrived. Miriam stood near the kitchen doorway with her youngest child behind her skirt. Her face changed when she saw me, but she did not smile. I told Jacob I had come to speak with my daughter alone. He began to say that matters between husband and wife should remain in their own home. I told him that may be true when both people are free to speak inside it. He stared at me. I was not a brave man in that moment. My heart was beating so hard I could hear it. Courage is not calmness. Sometimes it is only deciding which fear you are willing to obey. I went into the kitchen. The bread Miriam had left rising the day before had fallen in the bowl. Its surface was wrinkled and sour. That small, ruined loaf told me more than any speech could have. I asked Miriam whether she wanted to come home for a time. I did not ask what the bishop would say. I did not tell her what she ought to do. I asked what she wanted. She covered her mouth with one hand and began to cry again. This time she did not hide the sound. She and the children came with me that morning. There was no grand ending. Life rarely gives one. There were meetings, long conversations. Jacob was angry, then apologetic, then angry again. Some people said a wife should be more patient. Others spoke of vows as though only one person had made them. A few avoided us for a season. Miriam remained with us through the winter. In spring, Jacob agreed to meet regularly with two older men who would not excuse cruelty simply because it left no bruise. He also agreed that Miriam would control her own letters, visit her family freely, and speak without punishment through silence. I will not tell you that everything became easy. Trust does not return because a man promises it should. Miriam chose in time to return to her home. That was her choice, not mine. She returned with clearer boundaries and with the knowledge that our door would remain open. Some years later, she told me the marriage had become gentler. Not perfect, gentler. At my age, I have learned to respect that word. It does not pretend that broken things were never broken. It only says hands have stopped making the damage worse. Miriam is a grandmother now. When she visits, she often goes into the Washhouse with Esther's old basket on her arm. The building has a newer roof, but the same floorboards remain. On damp days, the room still smells of soap, wet wood, and iron from the old stove. I sometimes stand in the yard and see her through the window, and I think of the sentence she spoke there. I came home because I knew you would tell me to go back. What haunts me is not only that she said it. What haunts me is that she knew me correctly. She had studied my silences, my worries, and the things I praised. She had learned that keeping peace mattered more to me than knowing whether she had any peace within her. A child will often believe what a parent repeatedly shows, even when the parent says something kinder. 70 years have taught me that love must be made unmistakable, not assumed, not hidden behind duty, not saved for the day when trouble becomes undeniable. The people you love should know where they can go before they need to run there. They should know the door will open before their hand reaches the latch. I cannot return to that washhouse and answer my daughter correctly the first time. An old man receives no such mercy, but I could answer her the next morning. I could keep answering in the years that followed. Sometimes that is repentance. Not a feeling carried quietly, but a different answer given when life asks the question again. Thank you for sitting with me through this memory. If these stories from a long Amish life mean something to you, you may subscribe and return when I share another. And I would like to ask you one thing before you go. Did someone in your life ever make it clear that their door would stay open for you? If so, you may tell me about them below. A person like that deserves to be remembered.